2022 was a year of dramatic price inflation, and the Federal Reserve scrambled into action. But for those who control the money, what if, in addition to its creating a threat to our economic health, inflation presented an opportunity? Like what happened in the last great inflation of the 1970s. You had unions, you had workers' rights, you had wage equality. Until the inflation hit 8%, 9%, 10%, and wouldn't go away. And then the Fed took over and convinced us that the workers' economy had to change if we wanted to end the inflation. And it did. And the old economy didn't come back.
Pineapple refresher for Sheila? Pineapple refresher for Sheila. I know you look familiar. You came and got a refresher yesterday. Girl, you like the refreshers, don't you? Okay, just the espresso? Okay, we can do that. We can do that. Can we do just espresso?
Corporate accounts payable, Nina speaking.
Hello, Peter. What's happening? We have sort of a problem here. Yeah, you apparently didn't put one of the new cover sheets on your TPS reports.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry about that. I forgot.
Yeah. You see, we're putting the cover sheets on all TPS reports now before they go out. Did you see the memo about this?
You have a problem with authority, Mr. Anderson. You believe that you are special, that somehow the rules do not apply to you. Obviously, you are mistaken.
Okay, as you guys are going through the store, make sure you're thanking those customers for coming in. All of you guys, if you have extra time, I'm sure we're gonna need some help on the front end. Keep on going through this stuff. If people need help loading stuff on the carts, jump in.
How does one get a point?
I've outlined the exact parameters in an email, so check your spam folders, but basically, you do your job better, you get points. So, collect 15 points and redeem them for this polar bear.
Why is it all kid stuff and a vibrator? It's so gross.
There's lots of stuff. John Irving, Collected Works, 22 points. Or you can pool your points and redeem 55 for this maternity shirt.
Put that coffee down.
Which brings us to now. The pandemic ushered a transformative moment because for a brief period, many working people were permitted, were even forced to stop what they were doing and instead, perhaps, do nothing. Nothing except maybe to reflect. For decades, Americans were used to the idea that if we were lucky, we had a job, and that our bosses decided our wages and our work conditions.
Hello, Peter. What's happening? I'm gonna need you to go ahead and come in tomorrow. So if you could be here around 9, that would be great. Okay?
Then the pandemic nearly shut down the U.S. economy. Then some workers were instructed to get back to work, while others were told that for now, there just was no work for them. Still other workers were informed that they could resume their work, but through their own personal computers at their own kitchen tables. None of us had ever been allowed to believe that it was possible for jobs, for businesses to operate effectively just as before, even if we'd not driven across town and performed our duties at our regular desks in our cubicles in our office buildings.
Time to go to work. You can't beat me in this, bruh. Run it back. You can't beat me. There's your trap. Oh, what time? Is it 2 o'clock? Okay, I have a call. Stop. Seriously. Hey, team. How? Oh, what are you? You go first. Yeah. Can you not hear me? Can you?
What would you say in those circumstances? Oh, I think you've got to...
Sorry, this is like I'm like that academic from
You
Korea
are.
who has kids came onto this.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
Then months went by, and many of those who were allowed for the first time to work from home realized how much they liked doing this. While workers in retail and in hospitals resented the risks and conditions put upon them, and restaurants and services that had been shut down announced that they were open. And then they found once eager employees were reconsidering and dragging their heels about coming back.
So high. I have to say the power is still with the worker, and we're seeing it in the quit rates. Last year, over 50 million people quit their job. 4.1 quit their job, 4.1 million quit their job in December alone. So yes, it is tapering off just a little bit, but still those quit rates remain.
Resistance brewing in the core of Apple. On Monday, the company is expected to begin enforcing a new return to office policy for its corporate workers in the San Francisco Bay Area. At least 3 days a week in the office. That's according to a memo sent out by CEO Tim Cook, which NBC News obtained and was first reported by Bloomberg.
But the reality is, every CEO I know is having trouble finding employees. It's not just CEOs, it's restaurants, it's retail sales, any of these places. If you don't pay up, you're not going to be able to find the workers. So you can sit around and think it's not good for me to increase pay, but if you don't do it, you are not going to be able to service your customers. And that's just the reality of it.
You're 100% right, Becky. The problem is, it's almost right now, no matter how much you pay, you can't get the workers.
15 in a union, and we need it now.
15's never been the ceiling. It's always been the floor, you know, the bare minimum we ask for. So it's never been like in my mind, a labor shortage. It's been a shortage of pay and respect and benefits on these jobs.
Over the last 40 years, American workers' standard of living has slipped. Whatever productivity increases American workers made, which is tremendous, the value of that has gone into the pockets of corporations. American workers got nothing from that.
The pandemic period created conditions in which workers could re-examine the rules of their employment. Rules about where and when the work is done, what are the conditions, and what is it worth for us to do it. By no means did we get the chance to take over and rewrite those rules. But for the first time, going back as far as 1980 or 1981, we were again at the table.
My advice would be more to the employer, the boss. The fact of the matter is they're not in charge anymore. The employees are. And the quicker they realize that, the better they are going to be able to run their businesses. Even when they offer free dinners and lunches and parties, people still aren't coming in.
We're back with breaking news on the state of inflation here in the U.S. Yeah, the latest consumer price index report has just been released. Year over year, that number is up 8.2%, and that shows that costs people are paying for everyday items like food, rent, and energy has gone up. NBC News.
Reducing inflation is likely to require a sustained period of below-trend growth. Moreover, there will very likely be some softening of labor market conditions. While higher interest rates, slower growth, and softer labor market conditions will bring down inflation, they will also bring some pain to households and businesses.
That's a slower, that's a very slow level of growth, and it could give rise to increases in unemployment. But I think that is something that we think we need to have, and we think we need to have softer labor market conditions as well. You know, we're never going to say that there are too many people working, but the real point is this. Inflation, what we hear from people when we meet with them is that they really are suffering from inflation.
So I think wages affect prices and prices affect wages. I think we do think that some softening in labor market conditions will happen as we try to get inflation under control, and will need to happen.
I can't prove it by comments Powell has made publicly, but I wonder if the presidents of General Motors and of Amazon are as concerned about wage increases as they are about the simple inability to compel their employees to pull on long pants and show up to do the job in the place where they want them to do it.
Nice guy? I don't give a shit. Good father? Fuck you. Go home and play with your kids. You want to work here? Close. You think this is abuse? You think this is abuse, you cocksucker? You can't take this. How can you take the abuse you get on a shit?
We heard a big complaint at Apple when the word was that Tim Cook was going to pull them back. 3 days a week sounds pretty reasonable, I think, for most of us. I wonder if it's going to have a different power dynamic in different industries.
The jobs market is, how strong the jobs market is, how the hiring continues to outpace or really be much stronger than we ever anticipated it to be.
Speaking from the vantage point of March of 2023, GM, General Motors, has had to retreat from a policy that was to start in January to require all employees to return to the workplace 3 whole days a week. GM makes cars, and the workers are refusing to show up 3 days out of 5. And this without a union. Only 6% of American workers surveyed want to go back to an office-centric work system. 60% want a hybrid schedule, with some days at home and some days at the office. A third want to work exclusively from home. This is a revolution in workers' rights in the category of working conditions. It's a game changer.
At this point, with rates so high, I have to say the power is still with the worker, and we're seeing it in the quit rates. Last year, over 50 million people quit their job. 4.1 quit their job, 4.1.
But you're kind of tough. You're tough on what needs to be done. We need to get back to work.
I believe that the system is based on getting in, earning your stripes, showing what you can do, getting compensated for it, because the market, this is a market show, correct? The market sets wages. The market is based on, is there a unique skill set?
Labor shortages are acute.
Labor shortage has been so difficult for you. You guys have had to close stores.
The economic recovery from the worst of the pandemic continued.
I'm sure there are some labor shortages. However, I think that people's expectations about work are changing.
If I were one of those corporate executives right now, I see Powell waging a relentless fight through monetary practice and interest rates. And I want Powell to win. But what I want Powell to be most successful at, and this is if I am the General Motors president, is restoring the old order, the old balance of power between managers and workers that I enjoyed from 1980 right up until the pandemic.
Are you guys stupid? I'm the boss, and you all must do what I say.
Companies like Goldman Sachs, Tesla, Bank of America, and Morgan Stanley are requiring employees to return to the office full time.
They're feeling very confident about, it's back to school, it's back to the office, it's back to reality.
About 6.5% of employees in the U.S. were teleworking last month, fewer than in July, a sign that some workers could be getting called back in.
Hey, we did a good job.
For attorney Jessica Carroll, the prospect of going into the office full-time again would be a challenge.
We've kind of gotten used to this hybrid work from home experience. It would be hard to just go from what it is now to 5 days. It's kind of like ripping off the Band-Aid.
3.5 billion people get up and work. For some, work will be a fulfilling, empowering, well-paid experience. But for far too many, work will be unfulfilling, underpaid, and at times unsafe. And for those who speak up and attempt to organize and improve their conditions, they could be met with dismissals from work.
There's little sign of disinflation thus far in the category of core services excluding housing, a category that accounts for more than half of core consumer expenditures. To restore price stability, we'll need to see lower inflation in this sector, and there will very likely be some softening in the labor market conditions.
Wages, yes. Fight this battle through wages, if that's best. But this is a struggle about a picture, a perspective that is bigger than just wages. The Federal Reserve argument is that unstoppable wage growth is keeping the inflation going, and that inflation can't be reversed until wages come down and come down to no greater than 2% for a year. Chair Powell also insists that an inflation rate of 5.4%, and that's what it was for January 2023, still too high. Powell insists upon price stability, and he demands, and I quote, disinflation in the category of core services. When Powell says core services, he means, and I quote, healthcare, education, haircuts, and hospitality. It is hard for me to see those salaries as low as that, deserving the preoccupation of the Federal Reserve. Experts are still watching what is happening with other services, which include things like hotel rooms, sporting events, and health care. Look around you. Do the wages of those people in the other categories, does it really feel out of balance just now that they're driving the inflation?
Now, today's question comes from a house cleaner who says, Angela, I'm kind of in a bind. I'm loving my job and I want to go out of my way to help my customer, but I think I'm a people pleaser. How do I give my customer what they're expecting and not do too much for the price I'm charging? Oh, I love this question. All right, here's the answer. When you go to bid a customer's house, you're offering your time, a specific amount of time, for a specific amount of money. I will come to your house and I will do a series of things in exchange for a certain amount of money. And oftentimes we get so excited, we get caught up in the moment, We want the job that we oversell our services.
Is what Powell really fighting against? A disruption to the corporate capitalist paradigm in which workers have become almost interchangeable and obedient until the pandemic transformation. Are Jay Powell and his Federal Reserve determined to crush American wages in order to humble workers and protect employer dominance in setting wages and deciding working conditions?
You're raising interest rates to slow the economy, are you not?
Yes, to cool the economy off.
And one of the ways you measure your success, other than fluctuation in gross domestic product, is the unemployment rate. Is it not?
Yes, one of the measures.
Okay. So in effect, I'm not being critical. When you're slowing the economy, you're trying to put people out of work. That's your job, is it not?
Not really. We're trying to restore price stability.
No, you're trying to raise
not wages.
You're trying to raise the unemployment rate.
There are a lot of
that mean I know you don't like the phrase, so let me strike it. You're trying to raise the unemployment rate, are you not?
I said you're right, sir. You are the boss.
Mm-hmm.
You say it without hesitation.
That's right.
That's why today I'd like to give you something.
What is it, newbie?
My letter of resignation.
Oh, really, newbie? You don't want to work here? Big mistake.
Well, as a new employee, your leadership skills make me concerned. Well, sir, I don't think you're all bad. But somewhere down your path, you got lost. I think you used to be a leader, but now you're just a boss.
What's the difference?
Well, see, a boss says I. A leader says we.
Greek scholar politician Yanis Varoufakis recently discussed. After World War II, the U.S. president and in his service, the central banks, found themselves positioned as the referee at a table. Business sat at one side of the table and labor at the other. The president's job was to mediate, to firmly coax the two sides, labor management, into accommodations. A process that worked equitably for some 40 years. But thanks to the efforts of Ronald Reagan in the United States and Margaret Thatcher in the UK, that equilibrium ended in the 1980s as manufacturing and industry were shipped out of the US and England. This means that corporate leadership is at the table alone with the president or the prime minister. There's nobody sitting in labor's seat. The mediation is over, management decides. The pandemic has upended the equilibrium in a way that nothing else had, and the elites seem to be trying to reassure management that it's still in charge.
So there are areas where you could say we're seeing that fall off. The stickiest thing, though, is going to be the wage price spiral and fighting that. And that's going to, I don't think that takes faster rate increases. I just think it takes more time. But think about it. The cost of goods sold in America, 50 to 55% of that is labor.
One area that's concerning in the economy right now is what's called the wage price spiral. If you haven't heard of that, what that means is basically when you have rising wages that cause rising prices, which is basically inflation. And what's going on right now, if you look at the economy, is we have historically low unemployment. Our unemployment rate right now is sitting at about 3.5%. And if you look at that, you might think, well, that's a sign of a healthy economy. That's great, which it is. But the downside of it is it creates a labor shortage. When there's
Powell is trying to drive up employment from an impressive 3.4%, the best it's been in years, to a more miserable 6% or more because of the inflation. And his chief supporter, Larry Summers, says that this higher rate would have to stay in place for 2 to 5 years to beat the inflation. Powell's preoccupation with the threat of wage increases among the poorest workers is peculiar. Like Inspector Gervais in Les Miserables, Powell imagines he will discover the hiding place for wrongful, harmful wage increases that went to people who should not have gotten them.
I have heard such protestations every day for 20 years. Let's have no more explanations. Save your breath and save your tears. Honest work, just reward. That's the way to please the Lord.
But the downside of it is it creates a labor shortage. When there's a labor shortage, what happens for businesses is then they have to compete for a smaller pool of employees. And so they end up having to offer higher prices, higher salaries, higher hourly rates in order to attract those employees to work with them.
To a point, however, that's supply and demand. What right has the Fed to defy supply and demand economics at the one time that it might be working slightly on behalf of the lowest tier workers?
Chair Powell, if you hit your projections, do you know how many people who are currently working, going about their lives, will lose their jobs?
I don't have that number in front of me. I will say it's not
just
an
a math
intended
problem.
consequence. It's
Well,
not.
but it is, and it's in your report, and that would be about 2 million people who would lose their jobs, people who are working right now, making their mortgages. So, Chair Powell, if you could speak directly to the 2 million hardworking people who have decent jobs today, who you're planning to get fired over the next year, what would you say to them? How would you explain your view that they need to lose their jobs?
Will working people be better off if we just walk away from our jobs and inflation remains 5-6%?
One problem is that they're not even speaking the same language. To Chair Powell, 3.3 unemployment equals about 1.5 below target full employment. The Fed regards 5% unemployment as full employment, as the optimum. The Fed does not plot for 0% unemployment, neither for 4% unemployment. Rather, if 4 or 3% unemployment are achieved at the same time that 2% inflation is in effect, the Fed tolerates this risky lower unemployment number. So for Powell, going from 3.4 up to 5% unemployment is not traumatic. It'll just be the optimum, the level at which the Fed defines as full.
But fear not, working class, America's most treasured and politically convenient demographic. Chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, has heard the call.
It's clearly time to raise interest rates.
Yes! Inflation is bringing pain to ordinary households. So this is an action we must take.
Higher interest rates will bring down inflation. They will also bring some pain to households.
Hey, you know what might help your kick in the nuts? A nut kick.
Housing prices go higher, credit card debt go higher.
We need wages to come down pretty significantly.
We need fewer jobs. We need a higher unemployment rate.
We actually want to see and hear about more layoffs and lower wages, more firings.
There's going to need to be increases in unemployment to contain inflation.
I gotta say, it takes major balls to promote unemployment while in Bermuda, Bahama.
The Fed is trying to injure the economic growth enough to push that number to about 7.5 million unemployed. And of equal importance, perhaps, there will be a tempering of the exuberance of ordinary working Americans. For Powell, on behalf of the American employer, the exuberance of an American who must be enticed to come into the office twice a week or expects a pay raise before she will change bed linen in a hotel or to trim your hair. This is an imbalance of the management and labor arrangement that has prevailed in a certain kind of U.S. economy since the 1980s. A kind of economy that management wants to get back.